Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about something that dealers have been doing over the last few years at a much higher rate than normal, and this particular thing is going to hurt a lot of people. Before we get into the video though, as always, if you're going to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post videos just like this every single day. Let's get into it. What is this thing that some dealers have been doing over the last few years that's going to hurt a lot of people? Well, it can be described with one simple term: power booking. Now, before I explain what power booking is, I do need to mention that it is completely illegal. So have that in the back of your mind as I'm going through today's video. So what power booking is it's basically a practice where a dealership will lie to a lender. Now, what would they lie to a lender about? They will lie to a lender about the options on a particular vehicle. And the reason they do this is they basically want to get a higher loan amount on a vehicle. So they'll tell a lender that it'll have options that it doesn't actually have. So the lender will give them a higher loan amount. And the reason that they would do this is so that they can, one, charge more markup on that car, and two, get people approved on a car that they might not normally get approved on. And so I do need to kind of backstep a little bit and talk about some of the history of power booking. So back in the day, it was mainly used in cases where people had really bad credit and it was really hard to get them approved for a car. And so what dealers would do is they would lie to a lender and say that a car had all these options that it didn't have, and that they were selling this car to this person at a huge discount, even though it has all these options, because they're just trying to get them approved. And so the lender would go, oh, loan to value on this is pretty good. And if you guys are wondering, loan to value is basically the amount of money that someone's taking out a loan on a car compared to the value of that car. And so a good example is if a car is $30,000 and you take out a $30,000 loan on it, then your loan to value is 100%. And with people that have really bad credit, loan to value is extremely important because lenders want that loan to value ratio to typically be under 100%, and a lot of the times under 80%, depending on how bad the person's credit is. And so now you can see where power booking can come into play for dealers, because what it'll do is it'll allow them to sell a car at full retail, right? But then still be within a good loan to value ratio with a lender, because they're saying that it has options that it doesn't. So they're making it look like it's worth a lot more than it is. And that's historically how power booking was used. And so it was typically only used by, shady used car lots and all that kind of stuff. And that is still the case in today's market. However, something changed after the pandemic happened, and what that was this explosion of car values, especially new car prices. Used car prices obviously went up by a massive amount, but that whole situation is a little bit easier to contend with than new cars. And the reason why used cars are easier to contend with is if those values go up, then lenders can see that, and so they'll just simply loan more money on those used cars, because lenders loan based on book value with used cars, not based off of what the MSRP was. And so even if a car is selling for over original MSRP used, if the book value is there, the lender will loan out more money on it. On new cars, however, that is not the case, and this is where this new kind of power booking spree has kind of erupted. So over the last few years, obviously a lot of dealers have been selling new cars at huge premiums over MSRP. And so what that means is that these amounts they want over MSRP are not necessarily within the solid loan to value ratios that a lot of lenders want. And so they've been power booking with new cars. And you're probably wondering, well, how the heck are they able to do this? So first off, they will literally completely fudge invoices. And what they'll do is they'll basically just take an invoice for a much more expensive vehicle that's way more expensive than the vehicle they're selling a customer, and they'll just edit the VIN number to match the VIN number for the vehicle that they're actually selling the customer. And so just to give you guys a basic example that I feel like would make sense for a lot of people, this would be like a Toyota dealership selling someone an SR5 4Runner, which is the base model 4Runner. That's about a low $40,000 rig, and then taking the VIN number from the SR5 4Runner and putting it on the invoice for a 4Runner TRD Pro. and then giving that invoice to the lender and saying, hey, we're selling the customer this TRD Pro, which is a $55,000 Forerunner, right? And let's say that they're selling the SR5 for $55,000. And so then the loan to value is in line, and it's just super straightforward from the lender's perspective. They're going, okay, well, 100% loan to value, that ratio makes sense. And then they'll give out a loan on that car. They'll give a good interest rate to the customer. And it looks like everyone's happy because the dealer just charged a huge markup for this base model vehicle. The lender just got a loan, so they're going to make some good old interest money. And the customer just got a good interest rate, and they got the vehicle that they wanted, even though they had to pay a markup, right? That's just what the market is like. And so that's just an example of what some dealers are doing to get these huge loan amounts on new cars, when in a normal market or in a normal situation, lenders would not actually loan out the amounts that people are getting on these cars, because what they'll do is they'll look at the actual invoice of the car and they'll go, oh, you're trying to sell this person this $40,000, again, with our example, this $40,000 Forerunner for $55,000. That doesn't make any sense. That's like, we'll just, even though the math doesn't add up, we'll just say, oh, this is over our loan to value percentage. This doesn't work, so you have to, they have to put some money down or this or that, right? That's what would normally happen. And so you guys can see why dealers would want to be doing this, because it leads to them being able to make a whole lot of extra money, because they can literally charge more for a vehicle and they can still get their customers approved, even though they're charging way more than what that vehicle should be going for. Now, before I get into what you can do as a consumer to protect yourself from one of these crazy loans where you'd be massively underwater because, well, the dealership power booked, I do want to mention that there's a massive amount of investigation into this practice, because it's been a little bit more widespread now compared to in the past. And there have been a lot of people that have been fired from dealerships. And I also want to mention that this isn't typical dealership protocol. Yes, there are some bad players where like the entire dealership staff is like in on this whole power booking thing, and they're all like, that's just what their business model is. But for the most part, what typically happens is a dealership is completely against this practice because they don't want to go to business, because again, this is super illegal, and someone working for them decides to do the wrong thing. And what I've seen every single time that someone's decided to go down this path is they end up getting fired. And sometimes there is some jail time associated with this and some fines and all that kind of stuff. So again, just understand it's being looked into. That being said, there are some things that you can do as a consumer to protect yourself from this happening to you. So first off, if you're purchasing a used car, you can actually go into a lending institution and get a book value on that car. So then you'll know what a lender will actually loan out on that vehicle. So then you can see if the dealership is trying to sell you a vehicle way over what the loan value is. Now, I do need to mention that not every single car is close to the book value in terms of its actual market value. I saw this all the time when I worked at a dealership, especially with cars that were more on the niche or rare side of things. A good example when I worked at the Ram dealership was trucks that have the 5.9 Cummins in them, because the book value on those trucks was absolutely atrocious. Like I remember a truck came in and its book value was like $15,000, because again, it was like at the time it was like a 15-year-old truck and had some miles on it, but people were paying $25,000 to $30,000 all day for that truck because they wanted that powertrain so bad. And so the actual market value on that truck was substantially higher than the book value. And it's not like any shady business was happening. It's just that's what people are willing to pay for that truck, and book values just weren't in line. So understand that book values aren't always going to be accurate to actual car value. They typically tend to lag, and they're typically pretty inaccurate with super niche or specialty vehicles or older stuff especially. Like they're just not accurate whatsoever. But it could be an indication, if the book value is way off from the selling price, that something fishy could be happening with the dealership that you're working with. And so the best way for you to get around this is just do some price comps with the car that you're planning on purchasing. See what other of those particular cars are selling for in the market. And if the values are all pretty similar, then yeah, that dealership's probably not doing something shady. But if the dealership is selling that car for way more than other dealerships, then something's probably happening, or they're just really greedy and they want all the money for it. That doesn't necessarily mean they're power booking, but they might end up power booking to get you a loan on that car because they want all the money for it, right? It kind of all bleeds together. Now, on new cars, it's a lot more straightforward, because New cars have an invoice price that is the same regardless of where it's sold, right? And that's the nice thing about new cars. And so again, you can talk to a lender and you can talk to them about how much they would actually lend out on that new car, and you can get a really straightforward answer, because again, the lending institution will just take the invoice for that car and they'll loan out based on the invoice with that car. And so if a dealership wants a huge premium over MSRP on this car, then they're going to have to do one of two things if they want to get you a loan. They're going to have to call in and ask for a favor from the lender, or they're going to have to do some shady stuff to get you approved, or they're going to have to ask you for a massive amount of money down to cover all of the markup they want on this car. And so you guys can see that, well, two of the three things that they can do are completely legal and completely fine, but one of the things isn't. And again, that's the shortcut that a lot of dealers have been taking over the last few years to get all of these car deals and to continue to make crazy profits. And so that's pretty much going to sum things up for today's video. And I do want to reiterate again, this is being looked into, this is being investigated by a lot of different parties, and I've seen a lot of, what you'd call quote unquote bad players getting convicted for what's happening, people losing their jobs, and some people even serving some jail time for this whole situation, which is, again, crazy that it's become so widespread. But again, when you actually dig into it, it completely makes sense. And then also, just because a dealership is charging markups on a car, that doesn't mean that they're doing anything illegal. That just probably means that, well, the market value on that car is crazy, or that dealership is just, somewhat greedy. That's the car business for you. And I'll see ya.